Welcome to the Industry Insights Podcast, everybody here on the Career Café. Our goal here is to help make work better for you. And we do that by bringing you insights, career advice, and lessons learned by some of the industry's leading experts, executives, and entrepreneurs in finance and supply chain. We discuss what works and what doesn't so you can make better career decisions and achieve what you want in your career. And today I have a longtime HR professional, Wendy Knight, who I did work with years ago. It's great to have you on, Wendy. I'll tell the listeners a little bit about you. I think this is going to be a really interesting episode because in recent episodes, I've had a number of senior executives on, and we've talked about how they got to where they are in their career. But Wendy works with people when they're in that career decisioning mode and helping them make better career decisions. So she's working with those people in the moment to really have an impact on their career. Wendy is a seasoned HR professional who's held senior human resources roles with some very well-known corporate organizations, including Motorola, PwC, and Sierra Wireless. But Wendy has spent the last 15 years in the world of outplacement with LHH, a global leader in that industry. Wendy Knight, welcome to the podcast. It's great to see you again.
Thanks, Jeremy. Great to see you too. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Tell the listeners a little bit about your background and how you got into outplacement. Because when we worked together, you were that HR executive yourself, and then you transitioned into outplacement. For someone who's not familiar with outplacement, is that a fair way of describing what you're currently doing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The term outplacement has really been replaced with career transition. When outplacement first started in the 70s, it was very much helping people through that process of exiting the organization, and it wasn't of their decision typically. It's really our service and our side of the business has evolved to helping individuals transition. And I do say, we help you get from where you were to where you're going.
Sure.
We're not the recruiter that's going to, help place them in a job per se. We're going to help them make good decisions based on where they're at in their career and help them, position themselves in the market in a way that works best for them career-wise. So career transition tends to be the broader term, but outplacement is what people think of it sometimes from a historical perspective.
I will replace my verbiage going forward. Thank you for that. So, what an interesting spot to be, hey? Because I don't know what the most recent stats are. I think when I looked, it was people change careers perhaps every 4 years. Yeah. And if you're only doing something every 4 years, how practiced or good are you going to be at that? So I think you get to see people when they're in that moment and see what works, what doesn't work, and you're really able to help them through that whole process.
Yeah, and I think so. If we think about what's happened in careers, and I'll draw myself into it as a parallel. So when I started in HR, and I'm not going to say how many years ago it was, but it was a long time ago. But the older school thought process was, get out of school, get out of university, get in with a good company, and your career is kind of taken care of. And that's not really the reality anymore. Mergers, acquisitions, change in technology, et cetera. We all know what's going on in the world, and so we are seeing larger organizations where people may have started their careers with that mindset. Things are changing in the organization, their roles eliminated, their departments eliminated, whatever. And then they're coming to us for career transition support. Okay, so That's where I'm sitting right now in terms of helping people navigate their career, often at a point that wasn't of their choosing. Okay, so that's the whole career transition point of view from the corporate work that I do and the individuals that I'm working with. My own career in HR, while I started in a time when that was more the mindset, I had the opportunity to work in various industries, various organizations, and hone my skills as an HR generalist, starting out, in the training department at Eaton's, and then hiring temporary staff at the Eaton Center in Toronto after I graduated from university. So I hired Santa and the elves and, all sorts of things. So I started in that recruiting.
That's quite the accomplishment, actually.
And I've hired C-suite executives and sort of everybody in between over the course of my career. So in my 25 years as an HR generalist, I worked in a variety of sectors. and I built my skills. Benefits and compensation weren't my real forte, but it was all about rounding out my skill set as an HR generalist, ultimately as an HR leader. So I sort of hit a mid-career wall, if you will, early to mid 40s. Although interestingly, we're seeing that mid-career pivot point, and there's no one age or pivot point, but it's varying now for people because we're all living longer, we're all working longer. So people are able to do career pivots when they're 50. It's everyone's situation is unique.
Yeah.
In my case, it was sort of the early 40 stage of, I've been 25 years in corporate HR. I liked what I was doing. I had a young family. I was, trying to do it all and realizing maybe not always doing it all perfectly. So I took a bit of a break myself and went through the career transition process and saying, okay, so what do I like to do? What are my skills? What would I like to do more of? What would I like to do less of? So that whole process of self-awareness and market awareness, talking to people, leveraging my network, and I came up with, I might want to get a little closer to my HR roots, less about the leadership and more about the individual coaching and supporting. And so for me, it was recruiting or career transition or career development. I dealt with a lot of career transition and reorganization in the tech space in particular. And I'd also done a lot of coaching with professionals at PwC, it's Coopers and Lybrand in the day, but at PwC, in terms of new CAs and what do you want to do now that you're a CA? Do you want to specialize? Do you want to, go on the partner track in audit? Do you want to go into industry? So when I stepped back and did my own assessment of where my career was going, I really went through this process and I came up with sort of two lanes.
So you've described it a few times as a process. Was it a process in your mind at the time? Because I'm assuming that there is a process that you deploy in this type of initiative, and we'll get into that. But was it a process to you at the time?
Yes, it was. I sort of felt I'd hit a wall. And again, a lot of the people I work with, the leaving was not of their choice, but the process to get yourself in the driver's seat about what's next for your career is very similar. Right? We all go through transitions in our own way, right? Yeah. Based on our age and our stage of career, our goals, etc. But there is a process, and if you step back and you sort of say, how do I transition from one thing to another? It does start with, in some cases, letting go of where you've been.
Yeah.
And especially if that wasn't your choice to leave. So there's a bit of that letting go process. I say the next stage is kind of the taking stock. So who am I? Where am I at? What's going on with me holistically, right? My family, age and stage things, what variety of different issues. And how do my career goals and thoughts about my career fit into it? And, a lot of people don't really take the time to think about having career goals. They sort of ride the wave, which is all good, right? They get great opportunities. They get rewarded. Some recruiter reaches out to them, et cetera. So our careers can often just have a momentum of their own. And sometimes there is an external event that forces us to pause and evaluate. Or sometimes it's more of an intrinsic internal event where we sort of go, whoa, I gotta slow things down or stop, reboot. So I think ideally we would say, once a year, does everybody pursue their career goals? Check in on your finances, check in on your relationships, check in on your, your personal goals and et cetera. We don't do that realistically. Most of us aren't that disciplined. And so I think for a lot of us around career, it's easy to kind of get swept up with the wave. So when you're then thinking about a shift or when it's been forced upon you, then that process becomes reflective to start.
Is that something that you encourage people to do each year, sit down and spend some time intentionally working on your career as opposed to just the working in your career?
Yeah, so it's a great distinction, right? I think that most organizations now are getting a lot better at having a career conversation with an individual separate from the performance review conversation. So often that can be a good trigger to have those conversations with not only your boss and your organization and thinking about it there, but also with yourself, right? In terms of where you see yourself going. And we no longer expect the organization to owe us a career. It's all about we own our careers. And
Absolutely.
the organization is, they have a vested interest in training and developing us, and some organizations are able to commit to career pathing more than others, right? So I do encourage people whenever that formal process of performance review / career conversation is happening at work, it's a good trigger to then say, so let me step back a little bit and think in the bigger picture. How am I doing? Am I where I thought I might be? Are there things I could be doing?
I think it's a tough thing because as human nature, we know that we're supposed to save 10%. We know we're supposed to eat less than the calories than we burn and all that kind of stuff, but we don't because it's not human nature. And I think careers especially if we've been in that situation where, you move from one role to another role and opportunities avail themselves. But when you find yourself in that position, whether by choice or it wasn't your choice, where you need to make a move, again, having the skills to be able to navigate through that and I think that is something that kind of cuts across levels and seniority and experiences, regardless of whether you're starting your career or you're at the C level. As a human, when you go into that, all the same emotions, like I've talked to CFOs and CEOs that are between roles that the board said, hey, listen, we're going to go in a different direction. The same emotions apply when you're at that level, whether you were downsizing, you're in the first 3 years of your career in many cases. And so you find yourself in that, what works and what doesn't when you're in that situation. It's a really interesting. So there is a process that we can maybe talk a little bit more about that. So let's go back, give you a little bit of opportunity to talk about LHH because I'm interested. So global company, tell us a little bit more about the firm and what the organization does.
Right. We're LHH purchased Knightsbridge. So some of the Vancouver people or Canadians might be familiar with Knightsbridge, which was a private Canadian career transition, human capital organization. I think we use the human capital term more broadly because career transition is one of the practice areas. And we also do talent and leadership development, executive coaching, team building, succession planning, etc. So effectiveness there. So really, we're looking at almost the whole employment life cycle, if you will. But the transition piece that I'm a part of is when organizations and or individuals are often leaving the organization, and then
an individual could come to LHH, or an organization could potentially come to LHH.
Correct. Most of our customers are corporate. Right. And we do, now that we're part of the LHH global organization, and LHH as one of the businesses, and then in those 3 areas that I was talking about. So mostly corporate, and we have regional experts, if you will, right? So we know the local market in our various regions, and we also have that global footprint and that global resource base, thought leadership and technology piece that allows our individual clients or candidates to benefit. So usually it is corporate customers that are providing support to the individuals that were impacted by change in their organization. And so then we're going to connect with it. And we do often get individuals as well, but it's more of a corporate model. Okay. So
I just wanted to say if there were listeners of, hey, I want to contact Wendy or someone from LHH in their transitionary period, they could do so.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. So you're going to see a lot of things. So let's delve into that a little bit more. People some people have had very, very successful careers where they've worked for organizations for years. And we talked about that. My dad spent 40 plus years working for the same company, right? He never had to look for work ever. I mean, from the time he started to the time he retired, it was one organization. But you've seen people that have had several years of career success, but when it comes to career transition, perhaps they struggle. Why would they struggle? Why do people struggle? Some people struggle more than others when they're in that phase, do you think?
Yeah. So sometimes transition can really catch us off guard, right? We think we're on a path and we think everything's fine and we haven't really considered it. To step back a bit, we used to think of career pathing and we used to think in terms of climbing the career ladder. And that old school thinking was up is the only way and that the organization would look after us. We started moving to language more about a career lattice. Things
Yeah.
were in, we wouldn't necessarily, it wasn't up or out. It was, there were ways to enrich or enhance our career and our skills and that sort of thing. And really now it's careers are like this. We all make different decisions at different stages, and there isn't those clearly defined career paths always, right? So
I've heard the term career lily pads.
yes, lily pads, exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways to visualize or to talk about it. I think people who have not considered anything but the traditional career ladder have a harder time when sort of the rug's pulled out from under them, and they thought they were on a path and they hadn't considered options or hadn't been open to thinking that way. Now, and that's not just generational necessarily.
Right.
But I would say younger generations have seen their parents been laid off. They've understood that there is no such thing as employment for life anymore, or it's quite rare. So I think different generations and different personal circumstances, we have different views on what would normal be in terms
Sure.
of movement and how we manage our career. But I think that if we can embrace that it's our career, nobody owes it to us. We're in charge. Yes, losing your job can derail you a little bit and cause you to have to regroup and get back in the driver's seat. But the more people can sort of feel they have a high level vision, not in 2 years I want this job and in 5 years I want to be there. So if you're too set on that, you're also going to have a harder time. And look what's just happened in the last year, right? I mean, we've all had to pivot. We all have to be flexible. We've realized that it isn't just my company could get bought out, or there could be a variety of different economic circumstances. Technology could replace me, but a pandemic could come. Who knew? And now we've all had to pivot, and we're doing our work differently. So to answer your question about who struggles more, I mean, there's no one right answer, but the more flexible you are in terms of embracing a career as a fluid thing, not a set in stone thing, and the more you've been perhaps connected to your profession, connected to your community, the more you have a network that you can activate.
So important.
The better, right? The easier it is. And I'll tell you, one of the big learnings that a lot of people get out of the career transition process is, wow, I really let my external network go when I was in company X, right? Because your network to do your job can often be very internal, or it's your suppliers, or whatever. So we often think that our network, when we're working, we're networking, but it's all often related to the job or the organization.
Absolutely.
So that if we step back and say, what am I doing in my profession? Right? Am I networking with other people in other organizations? Do I have some go-to people I can pick up the phone and get an opinion on? Those are all things you can be doing in your current job to be aware of what's going on around you. And that way you're not caught off guard.
That needs to be so intentional, Wendy. I mean, because again, human nature is it's easier not to do that. You've got a busy day at work, then you're off with the family or whatever your life circumstances are. That's the first thing that's easy to go. And that's one of the big things that I'd love people to be able to take away from these episodes is that, yes, you are responsible. And the skills, I've said before that the skills to manage your career are frequently different than the skills required to do your job. And so you have to very intentionally focus on that. And so when we talked earlier about having a process that you go through and consciously integrating it into what you're doing, such an important message that really, I think when you're in that transitionary period, if you can integrate those things, you're going to be much, much better off through that process. So what are some of the top lessons that if people knew today would put them in a better position tomorrow for their career? I mean, certainly that would be one of them. Networking would be a key component of that. But are there other things that if you integrated or you started working on some things today would put you in a better position later on?
Yeah, so the networking is all part of it. I think there's networking for professional development, right? So again, being part of a professional association or just learning from other people in terms of how they're successful. There's that whole side of things. I think there's that awareness of what's going on in my world, whether it's my profession, whether it's my industry. Am I aware of trends? Am I on top of things? Are the skill sets, required of me shifting? And what am I doing to continue to learn, to continue to grow, to continue to be a viable candidate in the market? And whether or not people are thinking about making a change, it's always good to understand your marketability and to be thinking about that. If you're being left behind because your comparable job postings that are coming up are all asking for a skill set you don't have, then it might behoove you to get those skills. And, we've got LinkedIn Learning, we've got Coursera, we've got an awful lot of technology that can help us get experience, get exposure. So there's certainly the networking piece. And I would also argue the pandemic has made it easier to attend networking events because there's no longer, I can't make it because I got to go pick up my kid and it's not, I don't have time to go all the way downtown to the meeting. Now it's on Zoom. And so we're, there are different ways also to be thinking about how you network, how you stay connected, and what investment in yourself are you making in terms of your career? Have you even thought about it? So having it be conscious, do you have a mentor? Are there, do you have a few go-to people that you can brainstorm a little bit? How do you broaden that professional experience set? Volunteering in professional associations, or if you feel there's a gap in your skills, how might you fill it? And it might not be in your job, or maybe in your current job. How can you enrich your current job? There's a lot of things that I think you can be thinking about to unstick yourself if you're feeling stuck, and or to make yourself more market ready when the opportunity presents itself, and to be conscious.
Yes. But again, very self-directed, because you're talking about LinkedIn Learning, and there's a lot of things you can learn on YouTube by going and spending some time there to pick up skills and knowledge and get differing opinions. It makes you more adaptable to the situations that you're in. So again, that trend of being very self-directed. When we talk about networking, I think there's some folks that would hear that and go, "Oh yeah, I hear that all the time." But what does that really mean? I mean, attending a conference, yes, that could be network. Connecting with someone on LinkedIn, sure. But how do you feel about that? I think human-to-human connection, or having a relationship with somebody, in my mind, is really where the value of networking comes in, because it's people who help people. Just because you've connected with someone or you met them once doesn't mean that they're really part of your network, where they'll help you or do something, or opportunities will avail themselves. What are some of the words of advice that you have around that? What do you suggest there?
I think a lot of people estimate how big their network is. So if you think about the people that you interact with, maybe this last year we've been interacting a little less, but in terms of face-to-face, but who's in your network? It's family, it's friends, it's the person who cuts your hair, it's, we have a whole range. It's anything to do with sports or your kids' sports or whatever. So our network is probably broader than we think. Sometimes people think the network has to be, somebody in my profession or my association.
Right.
Be somebody that you worked with a while ago, that you connected with and haven't seen for a while. I agree with you around the reciprocity sort of a networking relationship, right? You don't want to feel like you're always asking for favors of somebody and not connecting with them. That network stays pretty loose, right? So we want to strengthen our networks, and that requires some work on our part as well, right? Some give and take. Sure. And I'd love your opinion on this, and if there's anything I can do to help you, right? So also, I think you've got to think about your network you're not networking to get a job. You're actually networking from a curiosity point of view, from a market awareness point of view, maybe from an advice point of view, depending on who the person is, right? So I think if we can broaden our interpretation of what networking actually is, it doesn't mean schmoozing at a conference necessarily and collecting business cards back in the day, right? Or, connecting with people on LinkedIn that you never will talk to again, right? that's not what we're talking about. It's not volume, but it's having a few genuine connections. It's increasing your awareness. It's perhaps planting some seeds and increasing awareness at an organization that interests you, and you're not looking to make a job move right now, and they may not have a job for you right now, but gather some information, make some connections. Maybe you know somebody who works there that can introduce you to somebody.
Right.
So it's information gathering, it's connectedness. And, in Vancouver, we always say we're a bit of a small town, and our networking, it can be a little more informal. Some professions or industries or environments or geographies might be more structured, right? So it varies. Each individual situation is different. I just encourage people to think outside the box a little bit more about what networking means. Who are you connected to? Who's interesting to you? Whose career do you find fascinating? And if they could give you two pieces of advice, what would it be?
Right.
Or whatever. So thinking a little more broadly about your network, I think,
Yeah.
is a helpful mindset.
And that mindset of continually integrating it, because again, if you only think about that when you are in that transitionary phase, again, you're not going to get the full value perhaps out of that, the value that comes from that in that instance.
Correct. If you feel like you're just reaching out and asking for help. So, there's a couple strategies, and if we switch to that sort of that process, that transition process, and where does networking fit into it? Because I actually think it fits into it in two places, right? So if the beginning of the transition process is taking stock, personally and professionally, where am I at? What would I like to be doing? More of, less of, etc. And also, what's going on in my world? What's going on in the market? Right? Are there industry trends? Are there things that will influence my search, etc.? So a bit of an iterative process around knowing yourself and knowing the market. And at that early front end of a transition process, I think you have an opportunity to leverage your network. Again, from a curiosity point of view, from an information gathering point of view, not from a job search point of view. You're not ready to look for a job yet.
Right.
You're getting context, you're getting setting, you're seeing how you're getting advice, that kind of thing. So I'm a big believer in sort of front end loading the process and gathering information around yourself and around the world that your career has been operating in. And this is the same whether you are doing a big capital C career change, right? Like a big career shift, or you want to do something similar. I think the process is
a job change versus a career change.
Yes, correct. And I think that, to your point earlier, early career, mid-career, late career, the process is still the same. It's checking in with yourself and your surroundings and gathering information and context and framework to then say, okay, given all of that, who am I? What's my brand? How do I want to be positioning myself? And that's where the resume and the LinkedIn is connecting to, aspirationally, where do you want to be? So you're positioning yourself less about the laundry list and the chronology of what you've done, as much as it is saying, so here's the value that I can add. Here are my transferable skills. Here are the things I'm interested in leveraging and doing more or doing differently or doing in a different environment, right? So it's having that reflective piece is so important to mounting a strategic job search.
Right. Yeah. So is this a 6-step documented process that you or is it not that formal?
So I think that this is the Wendy Knight view. This isn't LHH language necessarily. This is my view, but that whole taking stock is so important. There are some people that will come to us they're very clear on who they are. I'm a controller in a production manufacturing environment, and I like my job and I want to do the same job. We're going to jump into, let's tweak the resume. Let's make sure it reflects what you've done in your last job. Yeah. Let's make sure your LinkedIn is up to date, et cetera. And those people are probably going to move more quickly into job search, right? They're ready, they're clearer, they know who they are. But we often get people who are caught off guard and or for whom this is an opportunity to really rethink where they go. So yeah, job search versus career change. There's a distinction there. And if you're doing a similar job, you still want to think about your brand. You still want to tailor your resume. if it's been a while since you've done your resume, you may not have an applicant tracking system friendly resume. You may have a one that looks awesome and it's got all these little charts and symbols and columns that the applicant tracking
Right.
systems don't know what to do with, right?
Just don't. Yeah, just don't.
So it's all about that, right? It's ensuring that you're approaching the market in a way that makes sense for your target and how they're going to be recruiting. This is where I think my recruiting background doesn't hurt in the career transition piece, right? Because we're helping people present themselves in the recruitment community, and you want to be from a place of self-awareness and have that vision of what the ideal next step looks like, and your brand should align with that as much as possible. And then all of that is preparing you, of course, to then reach out to your network again. So if the early networking is market awareness, information gathering, starting to put meat on the bones in terms of your marketing strategy and your marketing plan. Once you have a plan and the branding all done to support it, then you can start to reach out to your network again. And it's a bit more, again, it's not fully, I'm looking for a job, but it is, I am ready for a job. Here's how you can help me. So you're going to use your network at different stages in your transition. And all of that prepares you, of course, for interviewing, and you know your worth, you've done your research, you can negotiate, and then you set yourself up for success in the new job. So that's kind of the process.
So if we could, if that's a good overview. So if we could use our network as a resource for career transition, but it's not only a resource for career transition, it's something that truly is an asset that the cumulative effect, they talk about compound interest when it comes to your career. If you started your career in that mindset, and the cumulative effect of networking and paying attention and building that over the life of your career would have enormous value that and by the way, you could use it when you're looking to transition in your career as well. I've got this aspirational idea that I'd love to inspire people to move to the point where you've worked on your career and your network and all these components so that when it came to career transition, talked about resumes. Resumes can be scary for people. You don't even need a resume, because if you had a network and goodwill and a brand where people knew you, and your goodwill wasn't just within the walls of your specific department in your organization, and you wanted to make a move or you needed to make a move, you could activate your network and people be like, come on in. You don't even need a resume. You're able to activate that. But that's this aspiration I'd like people to work towards. Very difficult to pull off in reality. But if you think long term, I do think that could be achievable if you put the time and resources to it.
Yeah. And I think that that's part of having that mindset, which says, I don't have my career plan set in stone, but I understand I'm going to grow, I'm going to be flexible, I'm going to continue to stay connected to people, and I want to be open to new opportunities. If you're carrying that mindset with you, if a transition is imposed on you, you'll have a quicker time in reacting. It will serve you well, and that vision of people know who you are. You've got an active network and a good brand. Then you will get tapped on the shoulder. I think the key thing is we get tapped on the shoulder, and it's not always for things we want to do that fit and align, but that's okay, right? Being able to say, appreciate you thinking of me. That's not really what I'm looking to do at this point, right? It's having those conversations. It's also being attuned to what is out there, how your brand is perceived, and tweaking it or refining it as necessary.
Yeah. When you use the term career plan, I've used that before, and I think it scares some people because it's very tough to have a career plan, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't engage in career planning.
Correct.
They're two different, to sequentially say, okay, I'm going to do this, then this, then this. Good luck pulling that off. But you should be involved in planning for your career and intentionally working towards that. Let's talk about the recent events of the last year and a half. How have you seen that change, or has it changed what goes into this process and the whole planning process and career management?
Mhm. So it's interesting. I mean, the obvious change is like now everybody has to be very comfortable with technology, and they have to not be freaked out about doing a video interview,
Right.
and the use of technology, right? And it'll be interesting to see going forward how much that stays in the process versus face-to-face interviewing, and at what stage in the transition and all of that. So there's that obvious one. I think the best practices though around self awareness and market awareness and your brand, and documenting that and having a search plan. I don't think any of that's changed. I think that the high level process is the same. The technology might slightly differ, right? So surprisingly, I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of organizations hit the pause button. They had to regroup and figure out how they were going to do their business remotely. And then we kind of got back to it, and it was a bit slow over the summer, and then things started to pick up. So the clients and candidates I'm working with are landing jobs. It's not like the market just has been on hold for
Right.
15 months. Not at all. It was an initial thing. The other piece that I'm seeing as organizations have pivoted to remote work is what's it going to look like in the future. And there's a lot more openness, I think, and willingness of some organizations more than others to consider remote employees. So do we need to limit ourselves to the Vancouver market if I don't need the person to come into my Vancouver office? Or could they come, once a month? Could they be in Calgary? And so I think we're probably going to see some evolution around that. We're going to probably see some organizations are going to say you're back to work and you're back in your desk 5 days a week in September, and others are going to be able to say, given our business, let's look at this hybrid model that we keep hearing about, right? It's going to be a hybrid model.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
depends on the organization, but if you can do your job remotely and you're meeting all the criteria and you're connecting to people and you don't actually need to be in the office, do we want to encourage that? Do we want to have 1 day a week where we're in the office because we know the importance of community and connection? The water cooler talk, the relationships, to the earlier point, it's about your network too. It is, we are human beings. We do like face to face better than technology,
Yeah.
right? If we have a choice. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I believe some organizations, their differentiators from a recruitment value proposition will probably shift.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
I can see it changing the scope of your network potentially as well, because if all of your regardless of where you're listening to this from, if your network is local, that may have made sense before. Maybe we need to broaden that out a little bit within the industry as a whole, because if you can work remotely, your employer could be anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that has an impact on how you go about that.
Yeah. And so everybody's situation and scenario is going to be different. There are certainly some industries where you have to be there. You can't work on the shop floor from your dining room table. It doesn't work, right? So
it's tough in manufacturing not to be in the manufacturing plant.
Not be there. Exactly. So and again, I think there are organizations, and even our own, where we're going to be looking at our clients to help lead this a little bit, because our clients are saying, do I want to come downtown and meet you face to face for a 45-minute meeting when I can just do it on Zoom? I'm set up at home now. Maybe I don't need to do that anymore. Maybe we do it for our first meeting can we shake hands even? I don't even know. But what's that going to look like in terms of our connecting with the client, and our one-on-one things? But they're also saying, we appreciate networking. We understand that group sessions have value, and we would be open when it's safe to do so to coming into the office to collaborate, to network, et cetera. So that, for my business, we're going to have to be thinking about that. And so for everybody who's thinking about their career, or where they take it next, that's going to be a consideration around the employer and or what the industry norms are. You've got to manage your own expectations accordingly. If you want to work from home and your job is in manufacturing, something might have to give.
Mental health has been a massive impact. I mean, pandemic aside, I think it's been building where people have become more aware of that, more sensitive to that. I think organizations and employers are probably more keen to assist within that. When you're talking about career change or job change, that can be a very emotionally and mentally exhausting experience. What can people do what have you seen, or what works well to mentally wrap your mind around what that process is and how it can impact life?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of the people we're dealing with from that outplacement career transition mindset, it's a loss. It's a loss of your job and your identity.
Mm,
And all of those proactive things we talked about earlier, the more you've done proactively, the better able you are to react. And so if
yes.
you haven't been as sort of open or thought beyond what your immediate circumstances were, then this loss really hits hard. And so part of our job is to help people regroup a little bit, right? Rebuild the confidence, etc. So it is a loss, and depending on what else is going on in your life personally, it can compound. So if stress at home or illnesses or whatever, those are moving, right? Those are, even a positive move is stressful. So if we think about what are
Yes.
some of the big
Been there.
stressors, yes. So what are some of those big stressors in life? Job change, not just job loss, but job change itself is stressful. You can be moving on to a great new organization and a great job that fits within your broader career plan. And guess what? It's all still new. It's how do you set yourself up for success in the first few months of that job? That's a transition. That's change. That's hard. And so the more we're aware of our self-care and the physical and mental health connection, the better, because even that positive of starting a new exciting job is still stressful. So you still need to look after yourself. You still need to be aware of balance, whatever that looks like for you, and setting some ground rules in terms of how you want to show up in the new organization, understanding their norms, their cultures. Do you get to work from home one day a week and not have to commute? Does that give you enough of a break to regroup from a mental health point of view? So I think there's a lot of different things that individual to each person or each job or each organization, but a lot of different things that we can be thinking about. And you're right, we're all much more aware of the importance of that. And I'll tell you, being in a job where you're unhappy is not good for your mental health. So that proactiveness of doesn't have to be status quo. It's a little harder to make the decision yourself to make a change. You have to be brave, but if you network and you do your research and you are connected to people and you can start to create a vision of what's next, and then it's actionable, and that might make a big difference to your mental health if you're not feeling fulfilled in what you're currently doing, or if it's not working for you.
Everything is interrelated. So if someone's listening and they're not engaged in some of these career management initiatives, start doing it today, because it's connected to your mental health. It's connected to your financial situation. It's connected to, we talked about, the purpose of the podcast is to help make work better for you. Well, work is just one part of the pie, but it's connected to everything else within that. All those things are integrated. So that's the very good insight. Career change versus job change. Someone's career is if you look up the definition of career, it's usually depending on which one you look at, a profession that lasts a long time, whether it's a lifetime or whatever the case is, versus a job. Moving from pivoting a career, because we hear more and more about that. Does the advice change when you're looking at changing a career versus changing a job?
I think where we encourage people, if it's a career change, you want to understand why, what's compelling you to do that, or what's propelling you in that direction. More emphasis on the skill assessment, the self-awareness, the gaps between the aspirational career and where you're currently at. So is that education, is that experience, right? And it may influence, if you've got a broader vision for your career, the next job change at a more tactical level can be informed by the bigger strategic career initiative. I'd like to get more experience leading people. I want to ultimately be a people manager. That could influence your next job change, because you say, so I want to at least get some team lead experience or have one or two direct reports in the next job I go to. I've been very specialized and I see my path as being more broadly people leadership. Maybe I take some courses and maybe I volunteer to get some experience, etc. So career change is broader. I think job change is a little more tactical. So a little more strategic on the career, a little more tactical on the job change. And the process is very similar, but where you spend time on the self-awareness, the skill development, the rebranding, the pivoting,
Yeah.
As a big C career change, you're going to spend more time up front on that because the investment's probably there to take a slightly different lane, maybe a parallel lane. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you need to change careers? Like where is the desire? What's the impetus of that? And so challenging somebody on maybe it is something a little bit different in what you're currently doing. So I think going through that process intentionally is good as well. Someone's looking to relocate. Even though things are a lot more remote now, but if someone's changing geographies, that can have a whole host of challenges. You work with people going from one location to another.
Absolutely. And we go back to our point of networking. So who do you know? So let's say you're in Calgary and you're relocating back to Vancouver. You might have grown up here, but you want to come back to Vancouver. So you start thinking about, are there people in your network in Calgary that know people in Vancouver that could open some doors? What about your neighbors, your friends, your family, etc. So the network is important. And again, it's the market awareness. So what do I need to know about the differences in the Vancouver market versus Calgary? Oh boy, Calgary's got all these head offices. Vancouver, wow, there's not a lot, a lot of government, Crown Court, the big companies, a lot of small tech, get the lay of the land, right? And so it's the research, it's the network, it's the networking for research, right? It's that front end loading, be aware of what's going on. In some circumstances, you almost need to have relocated to have a better
to really be taken seriously. It really does help.
It lowers the risk factor, right? So from the recruiting perspective, they're trying to minimize the risk, find the best candidate that's the closest fit. So if I'm a risk because I'm relocating, one way I can reduce that risk is to say I'm actually here, I'm committed, or I'm coming home, so there's less likelihood that I'm going to get freaked out by the housing market, or my family won't adjust or whatever. So you've got that whole factor as well. But I think it's more about build your network, understand what you're walking into. I think a lot of people that move to Vancouver don't appreciate how informal we are, how small we are, the size of our business. Business in Vancouver lists are a great source of information, and people look at the revenue sizes of businesses and they're coming from big markets. They're often really caught off guard. And so that whole, how do you position yourself to not be perceived as being big global company if your target is going to be small startups, right? You've got to do the work on the brand. You've got to connect with the right people. You've got to think through that value proposition in a way, because each geography is quite different.
Yeah, know your audience. It applies to so many things.
Yeah,
Wendy, this has been great. There's been a lot of valuable pieces of information here. I think we've talked about that networking piece as a common theme for this. If someone wants to reach out to you, I guess they could do so on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Wendy Knight at LHH, and I'm more than happy if people want to email me. It's wendy.knight@lhh.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll put that in the episode notes, and appreciate you doing this.
Thanks. It was fun. Enjoyed it. Hope it was helpful.